We're back here with Professor Lindevaldsen here on Just Liberty. Thank you for joining us. Professor Lindevaldsen, I understand you worked at the Sullivan and Cromwell law firm, which those who, most people outside of law, they hear these law firm names and their strings of names that, they found that human beings have a hard time remembering names sometimes because there's something about names where it's not necessarily even why is this person named this and why is that person named that? It's harder to remember. And so when you have like these strings of names that are the names of these law firms, people go, what's that? But to give maybe some background along those lines, I actually have a book about the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell and the history of Sullivan and Cromwell. There's a book on it. It's considered one of the leading New York City law firms. And you have these big law firms, New York City being the biggest city. And this is it's considered one of the top law firms that's out there among the large law firms. And it's not necessarily easy to get in the first place, much less to stay in. What was your experience like there?
I do consider it very fortunate to have obtained a job with them. I was an associate between my second and third year, and that the whole recruiting event on campus is itself a crazy thing. You had to be in the top certain percentage of your class to even put your resume in the bucket, and then there's an interview with all these different firms. So I was very fortunate. Shout out, there's a partner there who was a hiring partner. He was a Brooklyn Law alum, so he made sure every year he took one from Brooklyn Law School, and I was privileged to have that opportunity.
The only one from
the
law
only
school
one from Brooklyn. He gets one from Brooklyn.
Yeah. That's how selective.
It is absolutely. So I had I was there for 2.5 years, and then I had my first child, and thought that was an environment I want to move on from because the hours are long, and it was more sacrifice I think to the family than I wanted to make. But the experience was incredible. I did a lot of work before the Securities and Exchange Commission, Department of Justice. Really focused a lot on securities litigation. Great people. It was an environment because of the long hours that as a mom, a new mom, that was not something I wanted to maintain. But I liked the work. It was very challenging. Again, they just gave me great opportunities, and I wouldn't have traded for anything. It certainly was not the same environment I'm working in here at Liberty with the Christian values, but good work ethic. I think it developed me into a very good attorney, given the things I learned there and the training that I received. But from there, I lateraled into a firm that was created by Katsky and Corrins, and it's the longest mid-sized firm in Manhattan as far as how long it's been living. But all of those in existence, all of those partners came from large law firms, and they created it purposely to allow people to have a little more family-friendly environment. So we still worked hard, but I didn't have to be in the office 12 hours a day. I could go home, have dinner with my family, and maybe do work after they went to sleep. But that was a much better environment, and I stayed with them until I left private practice after 8 years of private practice to go work for Liberty Counsel.
There's a friend of mine in legal academia who I think worked something like 8 years at Sullivan Cromwell, and he said when he was there, they offered free lunch, which he thought was a great idea when he was first there. And then he would go to these lunches, and then he would notice the partners, he was an associate, the partners would be like staring at the associates, like, how long are you going to spend here at this lunch? And when are you going to get back to work? And that kind of made him decide that maybe it wasn't such a great idea to go to these lunches.
I didn't go to the lunches.
But, securities litigation, some people's eyes may glaze over when they hear that, and they might be like, what is this? And why would you even like such a thing? And, even though I've never taught or researched in it, I know a little bit about securities reg and litigation and the SEC. The law school I went to had a number of heads of the SEC who were professors, and then also an annual conference that would sometimes bring all the living heads of the SEC together and things along those lines. But even attorneys, there are some attorneys who are like securities reg, securities litigation, like reg D, reg I don't want to even touch any of that. Why did you like that, and what is it?
I was surprised by it. I'll boil it down to simple what it was essentially. But if there's any publicly traded entity, they of course sell interest in those companies, and everything that they do is regulated by the Securities Exchange Commission. That's a really layman's way of explaining that. And so I didn't go to law school thinking that's what I was going to do. too. But I became a research assistant to my contracts professor, and he was actually writing a broker-dealer treatise, so securities regulation. So after a year of doing research in the area, I fell in love with it. It's intellectually very challenging to engage in litigation in that area of law, and just the opportunities to work with obviously some very big entities we represented, and to be the interaction you have with the government and the interplay where they're all powerful and you're having to figure out how best to defend your client. Very challenging, very rewarding, but is not what I thought I was going to law school for. But I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What's your favorite course to teach?
My favorite, oh my goodness, my favorite course to teach. That's a tough one.
Is that like asking you to pick among your children?
It is almost like I'm loving contracts because I'm only in year 2 of that. So I love that. I've taught 12 courses across the curriculum at this point.
Yes.
And I think I fall back on legal methods.
Your favorite?
I think it's my favorite. It's a course we teach for second semester 1Ls who didn't perform quite as well as they would have hoped. And to watch that semester, it's just intense writing. It's almost like a little lab. We do lots of writing in class, and to watch the light bulbs go off, because law school is a learning curve. And for most folk, it's going to click sometime in that second semester if it didn't click first semester. And to be able to partner with them and to have that happen as a professor, it's probably the most rewarding class, I'll put it that way, of what I get to teach.
You know, I think I'm hearing a theme here that you really find gratifying and you enjoy seeing the light bulb go on, seeing students improve, seeing students reach up towards their potential and things along these lines. That's really neat, and that's probably, a major motivation, it sounds like, in all sorts of things that you've done.
Yeah, I didn't have anyone in my family who was an attorney, and so I understand that learning curve. And so if I can help a student move it along that learning curve and get them to where God wants them to be, I think that's the most rewarding thing you can do.
Well, as a fellow person who was the first from both sides of the family to go to law school, I could relate. And I did not have the benefit of a Professor Lindevaldsen when I was going to law school, but our students too. So thank you for sharing. And that is the conclusion of this episode of Just Liberty.